Hello there, macro students. Welcome back. I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this video where we talk about these calculations as a separate video so that when you may want to refer back to this one because this is the nuts and bolts of doing this. Now that you have your notes from the slides, this is where you may want to come back to it and refer to it. So instead of having it included in the other video where you'd have to kind of find it, you can just start off right here and go through these if you're studying for the exam or something. So here we have a pretty typical starting point on measuring price level change over time. In this case, they've given us some economic data. And all I've included here is the economic data for 1 year, and that's 2012, and I'm calling that the base year. And what we have are the items that are in the basket of goods, and I went with the shoe theme here. So I've got shoes, socks, and slippers. I've got the quantities of each of those that are part of the basket of good, and I've got the price of each of these that's in the basket of goods, okay? So what you need to do first, what the equation for CPI is the total cost of the basket of goods for the current year over the total cost of the basket of goods for the base year. In here you can see that there. And I wrote that a little sloppy, but CY is for current year and the BY is for base year. So what we are concerned with here, the reason I say that now, is because the equation for calculating CPI is concerned with the total cost of the basket of goods. And let me get that off there because it's so ugly, it's distracting. So how are we going to figure out the total cost? Well, if socks cost $10 each, I'm sorry, shoes is up front. If shoes cost $10 each and we sell 10 of them in the basket of goods, well then the total cost for shoes is $100. Same thing applies with every category. So $5 per sock, at 20 socks, that's $100 added in socks. And slippers are $10 a piece at 5 sets of slippers, so that's $50. And so our total cost for this basket of goods in the base year is $250. So let's just plug that into our CPI equation, right? Total cost in the current year. The current year just happens to be the base year. So the current cost is $250. The base year cost is $250 because it's the current year. You're going to multiply that by 100. Well, 250 over 250 equals 1. And then you multiply that by 100, and you end up with 100. Hopefully you can see that down there. This is just to illustrate to you why the CPI for the base year is always 100. Mathematically, it's true that the current year total cost of the basket of goods is the same as the base year total cost of the basket of goods. When you divide it, it equals 1. You multiply that by 100, and the base year CPI is 100. That's always true. So now let's go ahead and try to find the CPI of 2014. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put some data on here that's going to represent 2014. Okay, so I've got some data here now. And what this data is telling us is that we have new year. We have 2014. And let's pretend like 2014 is the current year, or the year that we're trying to find the CPI for. And that's what we're trying to do. We want to know the CPI for 2014. Again, I've given us quantities that were sold from the basket in 2014, and I've given the price that was sold in 2014. I included the quantities here to illustrate a pitfall that I don't want you to fall into. CPI is the cost that it would have taken in today's prices to buy the same basket of goods that was bought in the base year. So what we're going to use is current year prices at base year quantities, and that's very important. So for this, to just find the CPI for 2014, I want you to ignore these quantities. They don't really matter. We just want to know how the price changed. And that's the only reason I included the quantities over here. So let's go ahead and start totaling up how much the 2004 prices would have made the basket of goods from the base year. So we have 20 now instead of 10 for shoes. But at 10 shoes, that's $200 goes towards shoes. 10 times the 20 for socks is another 200. And 5 times the 5 times the quantity of 5 is 25. Okay? So our total cost of the basket of goods from the base year in 2014 prices would be 425. 425. So now what we want to do is we want to use the equation for CPI to figure out what the CPI is for 2014. And what that equation looks like is this. And I'm going to draw that right in here. I've got some room. Okay, I'll put it in that box. We've got the current year total cost, which is 425, over 250 times 100. Okay. Now maybe I should have thought this through real quick, because I think I might need to pull out my calculator to figure out what those numbers actually are. When you do these, they won't actually be hard enough that you'll need a calculator. But give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm back, and I just, through the miracles of calculator app on my phone, have determined that 425 over 250 comes out to 1.7 times 100 equals a CPI of 170. Okay, 100, that is horrible. How about that? 170. The CPI is 170. And that's how you calculate it, okay? You take the current year prices times the base year quantities, and you end up with the total cost of the basket of goods for current year. You put that over the total cost of the basket of goods from the base year. And you solve the equation, and it gives you a number. So there has been 70% inflation since the base year. That's what we can tell. Now the next kind of calculation I want to do is to actually use CPI to give us the rate of inflation. Okay, so here all I've given us is a couple of a few CPIs, right? So the CPI of the base year is always 100, so I included that there. But I've included a couple of other CPI numbers, and this is the point. This is why we need to use CPI to figure out inflation. Because what if I have the CPI for 2015 and it's 110? And then I have the CPI for 2016 and it's 120. Well, it's easy to see if I wanted to know how much inflation there was from base year. I don't have to do anything. If I want to know the inflation from base year, which maybe is 2008 or something, I could just say, well, it's 110, so there's been 10% inflation since the base year in 2015. Or for 2016, I could say, well, it's 120, so there's been 20% inflation since the base year. But what is the amount of inflation from 2015 to 2016? How much inflation has occurred? It's not 10%. It's something different than that. And that's what we're actually trying to get at. How much was the rate of inflation between any 2 years? And that's when you need the equation for inflation. So this is what it looks like. The equation is the change in CPI over the old CPI times 100. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it using the numbers that we've got. So here it is rewritten, and I've expanded it out. 120 minus 110, because that's going to give us the change in CPI. And we put that over 110 because that's the older CPI, and then we'll multiply that by 100. So let's start to solve that now. Simplified a little further, it looks like 10 over 110 times 100. Using a calculator, and again, any example that you would actually have to do as part of your homework or on a test, you wouldn't need to use a calculator. The numbers would be nice and round. That's the beauty of not being able to use calculators. But what we came to is that this is 0.09 for the reduction of this fraction, and then we'll multiply that by 100, which really just amounts to moving our decimal 2 places over, and so it equals 9%. So the rate of inflation from 2015 to 2016 was 9%. That's how we use CPI to determine the rate of inflation. And there you have it. That's all we're going to do with that. Go ahead and work through the homework packet. They're going to make you do a few more of these calculations, and it's really important with this packet that you take your time, you go through it, you read all the steps. They're going to clarify all of this. You're going to work through these equations, and there's no way to really make sure that you understand this other than actually working through the equations. And that is a very good work packet that you received in class. So go through it, put yourself through the paces, and we're going to talk all about it in class next time. So until then, happy studying.